William Bartlett, and you're watching Continuous Code. At work, I get to use a lot of different programming languages, and I really enjoy being a polyglot. I also like learning new languages and seeing what they have to offer, although I often find that there's nothing new under the sun. And these new languages don't necessarily do anything better than the old ones. So, I compiled my top 10 favorite programming languages. Now, I want to stress that they're my favorite programming languages. And I really hope that your top 10 is very different, because otherwise the world would be pretty boring. I considered various different factors when compiling this list. First of all, I used preference. If given the choice, I'd rather code in a higher placed language than a lower placed one. I also took into account generality of the language, whether it can be applied to various different domains or maybe just one or two. And I also included frequency. If I look back in the last year or 5 years, how many times have I really used this in a production environment? So I didn't include domain-specific languages like R or Ansible, XSLT, LaTeX, shell scripting, and SQL that I think would compare unfavorably to some of the general-purpose languages that are on this list. For obvious reasons, I also put aside esoteric languages. And for practical reasons, I couldn't include any languages that I just haven't learnt yet. At number 10, I chose C#. I'm not a huge fan of C#, but it does get the job done. There are a lot of pros to the language and to its environment. Visual Studio with ReSharper is okay. Nugget gives a pretty sturdy package manager and makes package distribution very palatable. Also, the recent fact that a lot of the build tools have been ported to Linux, especially with the .NET Core, which makes C# more DevOps friendly. But there are a lot of cons weighing down C#, and the biggest one is that Microsoft's philosophy pervades the whole language. It's a philosophy of being quick and easy, or it's our way or the highway. You can generate these amazing templates that do very simple tasks, and in one click they're on Azure and up and running. But as soon as you want to stray away from the trodden path, you find yourself completely alone, completely helpless, and having to re-implement half the standard library. Another con is the community around C#. If you look at Stack Overflow questions about C#, you generally have hacks as the top answers. And what's this with capitalizing method names? Pascal case? Seriously? At number 9, I chose C. Now, I'm not answering the question, if I was stuck on a desert island, what one programming language would I want? Of course that would be C in that situation, because anything else would be very difficult to bootstrap. But if I'm not on a desert island, I'd pick a few different languages above C. Now, I do have a few pros. Subsequent additions in C99, C11, C18 are very good and add more modern features to the language. And I've always been a big fan of direct serialization and deserialization from data structures to memory to be able to quickly save and load certain things. Some of the big cons, though, about the language are pointer management and lack of any safety whatsoever. At number 8, I picked both F# and OCaml. I think F# and OCaml are very similar. Obviously, F# took inspiration from OCaml and Haskell, but they're both very clearly on the SML side of the functional schism. I take F# over OCaml because F# has a few things taken from Haskell, like monad notation, and is compatible with the .NET framework. In fact, the only fun I've had in .NET was writing a parser in F# using the fparsec library and calling it from C# code within a web service. The architect on the project freaked out, but everything worked okay and continues to work to this day, and the developers were very delighted by the clarity of the code and the added maintainability. There are some pros to both languages. They're functional, but they don't shut imperative out. They have strict evaluation semantics, which we're all very used to. This makes the language more accessible to programmers who aren't familiar with functional programming, but it does come at a price. Module systems in these languages can be very powerful and have uses that type classes, as in Haskell, can't address. There are some cons. There are limitations on the kind of abstractions that you can build. F-sharp provides monad notation, but neither F-sharp nor OCaml can provide some of the abstraction of computation that Haskell can. And I don't like the fact that lazy semantics are added as a wrapper data type. At number 7, I picked Groovy. I especially use Groovy in build scripts, but there are other applications, such as quickly wiring up a Spring Boot app. There are a couple pros to the language, one of them being JVM compatibility, and the other being compact syntax with respect to Java. There are a couple cons though. I find that the language is very gimmicky if you want to build a full application in it. So sometimes I like to build some of the inner workings in Java and then build the outer layer that's wiring all those up in Groovy. And another con is that it requires the JVM to run, which is a bit odd for a scripting language, which you'd think would bring with it a much smaller runtime environment. At number 6, I picked Haskell. Haskell is by far my favorite functional language. I didn't rank it higher in this list because it's difficult to find a domain where Haskell truly shines. But the moments when you find them are great, and they're worth having Haskell in one's tool belt. Also, knowledge of Haskell transfers very well to other programming languages, especially as the functional paradigm becomes more and more pervasive. Some of the pros of Haskell are that it's purely functional. I/O is transparent and shows up in the type, which forces you to keep I/O where it belongs in the outer edges of your application. Also, lazy semantics are by default, but strict semantics can be enforced without changing the type, so there's no wrapper type to pass from one to the other. And this also allows you to make stream processing and list processing the same. I like the terse syntax, which is unrivaled compared to even Perl. And I like the fact that just about anything can be abstracted, even the notion of computation. This allows many algorithms to be engineered to be generic with respect to multi-threading or asynchronicity. And configuring dependency injection can be as simple as changing the type of the main function. We've recently seen real-world use of Haskell by Facebook for use in their spam detection system. And there are a couple big cons. One is the fact that if you want to have opaque logging, then it's considered unsafe. Because logging is I/O, it would have to show up in the return type of a function. But you don't necessarily want to have I/O all over your application. Yet you want to do logging in just about anywhere, so you kind of have to sidestep that one. And then one of the biggest difficulties with Haskell is that the rabbit hole is deep. Just the simple concept of monad can needlessly take on epic, mind-melting proportions. And I'm not even talking about category theory. At number 5, I picked Python. I like Python, but not in a fanatical way. Given all the other languages out there, I think Python shines best as a portable replacement for shell scripting, and its use in Ansible makes that very much apparent. Some of the pros are that it's portable scripting, as I just said. It's easy to teach, it was designed that way, and it has a good mix of handy features like lambdas, generators, list comprehension, list splices. But there are a few cons to this language, and one of them, which I just can't understand why it's still a problem, is project lifecycle management. You have virtualenv, you have requirements.txt, setup.py, setup.config, pyproject.toml, and to package Python projects you can use an egg. Okay, that makes sense, Python is a snake. And then you can use a wheel? I don't get where that name came from. Also, the fact that visibility is a discipline, everything's public by default, is a bit of a problem when you want to scale applications. The whole issue with Python 2 deprecation is a big fiasco, and sometimes I would rather pick another language because of poor performance. At number 4, I picked JavaScript. Personally, no other language has seesawed between love and hate as much as JavaScript. My appreciation or disdain has changed daily, almost as frequently as new web frameworks have come out. If we could do without JavaScript, I think the world would be a better place. But as it is, anything worth its salt on the web, including my beloved web components, require JavaScript. That said, since the object model of JavaScript was ironed out, it has become an interesting case study. JavaScript comes closer to Smalltalk at being purely object-oriented, whereas Java, C#, and the like are class-oriented. Some of the pros are that the V8 engine is very high performance. There are lots and lots of libraries to choose from. And I think that the language and the standard library have evolved well in the last 10 years. But there are a couple cons, and the biggest one is the community. Stack Overflow's 2019 survey put JavaScript as the most popular programming language, and this isn't surprising given the importance of the web itself and JavaScript's market share on it. But despite this huge community, libraries of JavaScript and Node.js do not measure up favorably to other language communities. This is because most library contributors would rather start up a new project than contribute to an existing one. I think some consensus would do a lot of good to the community, especially in two areas. The first one would be MMVM libraries. Come on, do we need Angular, React, Vue, Mithril, and 30 other libraries? I don't think so. And another culprit, like in Python, is project lifecycle management. We've gone from NPM to Bower to Yarn to NPM again, and then there are other tools coming out like Jam and various others. Please. And the other con is that JavaScript has gained some obscure semantics and lots of edge cases given its evolution over the years. At number 3, I picked Ruby. I don't get to do a lot of Ruby these days, which is a shame. A lot of great libraries that I use took inspiration from Ruby counterparts. Some of the pros are that there are a lot of great libraries, a lot of interesting design patterns stemmed from Ruby development, and I really like some of the DSLs that are developed in Ruby. Some of the cons are that there's slightly poor performance, even compared to Python, and sometimes the syntax can be a little bit clunky when you're not using DSLs. At number 2, I picked Rust. Rust has been my favorite language to learn, and funnily enough, it's made me want to learn more languages and to be even more polyglot than I was. I'm going to make 2 bold statements. I think that Rust is a new paradigm that sits in between the imperative and the functional. It is neither and both at the same time. I also think that Rust will replace C++ and Go almost entirely, and will replace C and Python to some extent. I think that Python in future years will be relegated mostly to that scripting, portable scripting applications. There are many pros to the Rust programming language. There's a very ingenious balance of thread-safe, imperative, functional, low-level and high-level features. I think the compiler messages are the best. I think that application lifecycle management is solid in Rust with Cargo, taking inspiration from state-of-the-art build tools from other languages. And I love that Cargo initiates a version control when creating a new project. That's a little interesting touch. And the community is very welcoming. Just sometimes try and keep your inner zealot in check. There are a couple cons though. I think that Rust definitely has a steep initial learning curve, just due to the syntax and to having to learn the borrowing pattern. But I think it's great to persevere and to get past those. And once you learn that, Rust is really fun to use. Also at the moment there are a lot fewer libraries than maybe in Go. But that should only be temporary, so please go contribute to Rust. at number 1, I picked Java. I always keep coming back to Java. I have my misgivings and gripes about how Java could be better at this or a little bit better at that, but I always keep coming back to it. I think in many ways that the Spring framework and especially Spring Boot kind of saved Java and has kept it at the forefront. And I was a bit sad to see applets being deprecated. Okay, so Rust, C++, and C have better performance. Okay, Go, Python, and Kotlin apps require less code. Scala has more functional paradigm and actor model libraries. JavaScript won on the front end. But I still keep coming back to Java. And sometimes I find myself really wanting to come back to Maven. Now, Maven too has its shortcomings, but no other build system is as versatile and modular and opinionated. Some of the pros of Java is the uncluttered syntax and semantics, the backwards compatibility, the amazing community and libraries, and, as I said, the Maven build system. Some of the cons are the verbose syntax, and some of the language evolution has been slow, and now I think it's becoming too fast. And annotation processing is better than code generation, but sometimes it's worse than having higher abstractions, some of the abstractions that you can have in Haskell, maybe. So, those are my favorite programming languages now, but I'll be learning new ones over the year, maybe Clojure, Swift, I don't know, and that might shake up the rankings a bit. When learning a new language, I think it's important to get a feel for what situations that language will really shine in, and that way you can use the best tool for the job.